أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين. We are continuing our discussion of al-Kursi. We said that everything has a peak, and the peak of the Quran is al-Kursi, the verse of 255 in Surah Baqarah. This is a beautiful verse that it gives us protection, and many of us have it memorized, and we encourage our young, inshallah, to be able to memorize this very important verse. The tradition we read last week from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, that Allah removes with this verse 1,000 types of calamity, 1,000 types of hardship in the world, and 1,000 types of hardship in the hereafter. So therefore, take heed to this very important verse. Tonight we'll be talking about verse 256 and 257. And we said, is it Ayatul Kursi or is it Ayatul Kursi, for example? Which one is it? We said the opinion of Ayatollah Makarim and the opinion of Sahiba al-Mizan, they say that it is just one verse. It is to Ali al-Azim 255. One of the proofs of this is that Ayatul Kursi has 50 words, and when you count, for example, in the first verse, it has 50. What about 256 and 257? Are they incorporated part of Ayatul Kursi or not? The majority we said, say 255. Some say 256 and 257 should just be not recited as Ayatul Kursi, recommended. And some say, from the hadith that we have, it is actually part of Ayatul Kursi. And if you look at the Risala of some of the ulama, like Ayatollah Sistani, when he's mentioning, for example, to do this action with Ayatul Kursi or whatever, he says to do it until verse 257 as a matter of precaution. So some of the fuqaha said that these two verses that we'll talk tonight, as a matter of precaution, recite it with it. And when you look also at these two verses, you see that there's a lot to learn. We're going to recite the verse 256 first, and then we'll inshallah go through the explanation. La ikraha fi din. I'm sure that most of you have heard this verse, and we have to explain about it. What does it mean? There is no compulsion in religion, and we'll talk about it. Does this mean, for example, that in a Muslim society, a person should be free and should do whatever, can be able to do whatever they want? They can commit any haram they want. They can drive however fast they want, for example, because there's no la ikraha fi din. Does it mean, for example, if I'm in an Islamic country and I break the speed limit, if I do, for example, something that is very dangerous, I show this verse to the police officers and la ikraha fi din, let me go, and they should let me go? Or does la ikraha fi din here have a different meaning, and a more in-depth meaning? We'll talk about it, inshallah. So the first part is this, la ikraha fi din qad tabayyana ar-rushdu min al-ghayy, that the right course has been clear from the wrong. Ghayy we have here, and we have rushd. Rushd is guidance. Rushd is what is clear, and al-ghayy is something which is an error, wrong. So when you look at this verse, we'll go through the explanations of this part first. We see that what is meant by la ikraha fi din. There's a sha'n al-nuzul. Everyone here know what sha'n al-nuzul is? It is that there is a situation, a circumstance for verse to descend. Something happened, and then the verse came. Some maybe call this asbab al-nuzul, the sabab, would cause the verse to come down. What is the sha'an and the circumstance? So they say there is this person by the name in Tafsir of Tabarsi, Majmul Bayan, mentions that there's this person called Abu Hussein, and he had two sons. And these two sons, because of doing trade and business, with the Levant, which is around Sham, Syria, they were influenced by Christians. And this believer, his sons, become Christians. And they come to the Prophet, he comes, and he was very upset, asking the Prophet, force them back to religion, these two sons of mine. Bring them back to religion. What are they doing? They became Christian. And the messenger of Allah mentioned this. Can I compel them to return to my religion? He asked this. Can I compel them to return to my religion? And the Prophet was revealed this verse, La ikraha fid deen. The Prophet, this verse came from, you cannot compel these two to come to Islam. Why do you think that you cannot force people logically to come to Islam? Why is this false? A lot of times if you think and read books about Islam, you think that Islam was spread by force. Even if you agree, that during the Khulafa's time, the Caliph's time, that the territory of Islam spread, but people were not forced to become Muslim. During the Prophet's time, do you have a part or evidence in history where the Prophet would force somebody to become Muslim? Does it even make logical sense? Why does it not make sense? Where is the place of Iman? Where is the place of faith? It is the heart, right? If a person is forced to believe, you say, be Muslim or else, for example, I'll do away with you. His heart, you can't force his heart to believe. You can't compel his heart. So therefore, he might just say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. But according to us, according to reality, according to the batin, is he really a Muslim or no? Someone who zahiran says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, but inside is a disbeliever and doesn't believe, is he really Muslim? No. So he's not a Muslim. You cannot force someone to become Muslim. And second of all, do we even need to force people to become Muslim? When we have قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ, when Allah has made it clear what is guidance, what is right, compared to what is wrong. When you look at the message of Islam, is a message of monotheism. Look at me, talked about Allah's attributes, how beautiful it was in al-Kursi 255. When you have such a perfect God, when you have such a perfect tawsif in the Quran about Allah and His unity, when you have such a logical position that we're instructed to ask people, invite people with basira and insight, do we need to even force them? If we didn't have any logical background, if we didn't have a religion that made so much common sense, that yes, many religions today are spread by force. If you see, for example, many of the slaves that came to the United States, they brought them and they forced them to slavery just because of their skin color. Just because of their skin color, they brought them here. And if you look at the history of them, many of them were Muslim because this was the western part of Africa. Many of them were Muslim. And you see some who have done research that some of the first masjids that were built or first places to be worshipped were by the slaves, were masjids in Florida and other places. They were Muslim. And they would write, for example, Quran, they would preserve it. But yet they force them, because in some religions, they come and they force, because it doesn't have any logical basis. Because it says something that doesn't really make sense. So how can I make the world, for example, this religion? Either by force, either by threatening them, or sometimes eliminating. If you look at the Crusades, for example, how many Muslims were killed, for example, in the Crusades? Or, for example, you see how many were converted. Today, you see most of Latin America, Central America is Catholic, right? How did they become Christian? Most of these, if you look at their DNA, is actually goes back to the Native Americans. How would the Native Americans, all of them that exist today, basically, majority of them become Christian? So therefore, you see that actually that thing that they impose on Islam, and they say that Islam is spread by the sword, Islam is made by force, is actually false. That is for other religions. And we have this very pure, important verse, and that this has always been guidance even when the Muslims took control of Mecca. And you see in Fathul Makkah, the conquest of Mecca in the 8th year, when Rasulullah had the opportunity to get revenge, there he didn't force them to become Muslim. Therefore, this La ikraha fi din was guidance for the people that you cannot force them to Islam. Actually, it was the day of Yawmul Marhama, the day of forgiveness. Many people became Muslim. Some even did not become Muslim after the conquest of Mecca. So therefore, we see that we have to interpret this as even if I tried to force someone to be Muslim, it wouldn't make sense, because our definition of Islam is that the heart has to recognize the place of Iman and faith is the heart. And the heart has to say that I am Muslim, or then I'll be Muslim. If I just say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, I'm Zahiran Muslim, but Batinan, I'm not Muslim. So therefore, we have to interpret this verse very correctly. Now, very interesting, there's this topic that I was coming by and studying a little bit, and that is this: how many years, basically, generally, was the Quran revealed during the Prophet's life? Around 23 years that the Quran was revealed. The Quran was revealed in different circumstances, right? Some of it was in the 13 years of Mecca, some it was in the 10 years in Medina. And no politician, no political ruler knows what will happen. How many political rulers do we have changes their opinion? They change, for example, that book that if they had for a manifest for people to follow, they change it. But then you look at Islam and you read the Holy Quran, and it makes perfect sense, and you forget that, wait a minute, the revelation of the Quran was tadriji, was 23 years around, was 20 years around. So how is the Quran fit in a perfect book? Because adding to this, the Quran has sha'na nuzul, asbab al-nuzul. Verses came by different things that happen. One of them, he said, La ikraha fi din, came from what? The sons of, for example, Abu Hussein that became murtad, for example, were disbelievers. Now you have a book, not only is it in Medina, in Mecca, in different circumstances. Then you have a book that has different shana nuzul. And so many verses have a reason why. This was a reason, this was a reason, this was a reason. And yet it has perfect symmetry at the end. If you think of it, all these instances happen, and this become a verse, this become a verse, this become a verse. But how does it, when you put it and collect it all together in the order that the Holy Quran has, it is completely coherent. One of them is it has adam wa ikhtilaf. It doesn't have any differences. There was a non-Muslim, a person studying this by the name of Raymond Farron. And he grew up as a non-Muslim. But he studied the symmetry of the Quran. He studied the Holy Quran in the classical text because he is today a professor in Kuwait about ash'ar and poetry. And some of the Arabs complain and says, why do we have to learn Arabic grammar or ash'ar from a white person, for example? Why do we have to learn from a white man? And he himself studied the symmetry of Quran. And he has a book, the Quran is called The Structure of Quran Interpretation, a study of symmetry and coherence in Islam's holy texts. And when you put all of these sha'na nuzul together, it's impossible, he says, to put it as one coherent text, because this happened one day, that happened the other day, this other sha'na nuzul happened for another day, and for all to be compiled as one book is impossible, he said. So while he was researching this, he became Muslim. And today he's teaching in Kuwait, as far as I believe. You can look at his book. You can download a study of symmetry and coherence, and he talks about the symmetry in Surah Al-Fatiha, how it's symmetric. And I want you to know this, another of the miracles of the Holy Quran is how a book was formulated. And today, when you read it, you read the entire Quran, inshallah, Shahr Ramadan, but it's a book that's completely coherent, book that doesn't have any ikhtilaf. But if you look at all the other books, even if they're all written together, you see differences. So that is one way that we understand the Quran to be a miracle. Now we're going to continue to the next verse, the same verse, but the next part of it. فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ. Very interesting is Allah in the Quran later on says, وَيُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. There are two things that we have to do. And Quran mentioned this. One is to believe in its fi'l mudari. What's fi'l mudari signify? Present, continuous. You have to believe in Quran. Not, I believe in Allah once, I used to believe. I have to continuously believe. I have to believe until I die. I have to leave this world with the death of Iman. So this mudari. وَيُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. Then it says, وَيَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ. But not only believing in Allah is sufficient. Quran is saying that you also must disbelieve in the Taghut. You have to disbelieve in the Taghut. Let's do a little bit of research and see what is the Taghut that we have to disbelieve. What are the different interpretations? And Tafsir Namunah says devils, for example. Or some of the hadith might say shaitan, for example. Idols. Some say Taghut are tyrannical rulers. The verse that brother read, Ana Rabbukumul A'la. Who said this? Fir'aun. Ana Rabbukumul A'la, for example. Tyrants. Or false ideologies or systems, the Taghut. False ideologies or systems, possibly in tafsir. Or any source of misguidance or deviation from the truth. I have to be able to disbelieve. I have to be able to separate myself from the Taghut. You cannot have one who believes, just say, I'm Muslim, I believe Allah, but yes, everyone else who is the enemy of Islam, yes, everyone who is oppressing, everyone else who is misguiding, everyone else who is, for example, doing the devil's work, the satanic work, I become their friends, for example, and I, for example, follow them, and they become part of my awliya, they're my walis now. We see that? We have both of these in Ayatul Kursi, or Ayatul Kursi, we have verse 256. فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِنْ بِاللَّهِ. So dear brother and sister, think of believing in Allah and also rejecting and disbelieving the Taghut. فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بَالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى. If you want to have complete faith, you have to have these two. Then you have grasped the firm handhold. Hadith says, Urwatul Wuthqa is Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Please recite salawat ala. And we've seen whoever has held on to the love of Imam Ali alayhi salam, whoever has held on to the love of Ahlul Bayt, we see that they have the asas of Islam. They have the pillars and foundation of Islam. But yet those who reject Ahlul Bayt, or those who deny them, or those who bring their position low and try to say that the Shiism, for example, is inflated, that had been introduced by the Qulat, they have brought this in there, this du'as from there, this ziyarat's from there, this fadilat you say is not apparent, and they keep working against Amir al-Mu'mineen's status and the status of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. You see what happens to them, their misguidance. My personal experience has always been, as someone growing up in Southern California, that whoever has held on to Urwatul Wuthqa, whoever I saw held on to Imam Ali alayhi salam, the love of the Prophet and his family, I saw that after many years, I went and came back after many years, I saw them as pious individuals. But those who just said, let's just have the Quran. Let's have the Quran without the bayan, without explanation. Those who said, don't worry too much about the love of the Prophet, about azadari, about crying for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, about, for example, the fuqaha. Then you go and come back, I saw truly they were misguided. So Urwatul Wuthqa, or Hablullah al-Mateen, the strong, the rope that Allah we can cling on to, is Amir al-Mu'mineen and the family. Therefore we have to cling on to the rope. Now that we love Imam Ali alayhi salam as the successor of the Prophet, we have to be able to hold on to it, because lan fisama laha. This handhold will never break, will never let go. Every handhold place you go to hold on, there's a capacity. What if I put too much weight on it, for example? But this strong handhold will not be able to break. So therefore, we see this is truth faith. Wallahu Samiyun Alim. Then the last of this verse is Allah hears, Allah knows. Whatever you do in your heart, Allah knows. Whatever you say, Allah knows. Whatever you think that others do not know, Allah knows. Even our intentions. Sometimes our intentions are in a way do not have ikhlas. For example, I come to Jama'at prayers, I come here late, and then I see, for example, I'm very saddened that I'm going to miss the Jama'at, but then I say, oh, look, they haven't even started yet. I get very happy. Why? Because the Imam of Salat is not here yet. I get very happy. I say to myself, look, I can pray Maghrib and Jama'ah. But then I was to say, oh, wait, what happened to the Imam of Jama'ah? Maybe something happened to him. Why is he late? Maybe for example, his honor is threatened or something. Something happened to him. I don't care, but I care about myself. So you see, sometimes my intentions can be in a way, I think it's Rahmani, I think it's good. But in a way, I am just fooling myself because there's a little bit of shaitanic inclinations in this intention. So Allah knows all of this. So sometimes if somebody fails, you get happy. For example, other children, you have children in school, you want them to be number one. Oh, they failed. Oh, alhamdulillah, for example, they failed. Why? So your child can be number one. These are intentions that Allah knows. So we have to fix ourselves in a way that we have to want good for everyone, every child. We need to have good for the one who leads the Salat to Jama'ah, that he arrives here safely, for example. He doesn't have traffic. You make dua that he doesn't have traffic on the way. These are very important, inshallah. So therefore, don't just think of yourselves. Think of others as well. And unfortunately, we're always like this. If you reflect, how many times that I kind of want people to fail so that it'd be easier for me, or that it can be, for example, I can win. How many times do you think we have this intention? And until we work on ourselves, we will discover that Wallahu Sami'un Alim. Allah knows all of your intentions. Allah knows why you are here. Allah knows, even sometimes when people are all against you, sometimes even maybe your family and friends do not understand you, why you make a decision. But as long as it is for Allah, Allah knows. He hears, He listens, He knows what you did for Him. People do not have to know necessarily why you're doing something. Sometimes we have, stories of one of my friends was leading a Hajj caravan. He said that I was always wondering, there's this one person who would come in Hajj, and he would wear a mask and wear clothes and would clean the toilets, clean all the toilets in Hajj. And later on, he would cover his identity. And then later on, investigate, who is this guy who's cleaning the toilets in Hajj, the toilets? And then he says, oh, this guy, he has a big position actually. He's a very popular person, has a very big position. And then he said to me, he says, Imam al-Zaman purchases some actions. These actions, the Imam of the age purchases. So he said, I want to clean the toilets of the Hujjaj in order, for example, to get that special sincerity. He would cover himself, for example. So we have people that work this way. Nobody find out, nobody. Others, we have, for example, Hajj caravans, and they're always like, do you know how many times I went to Hajj? Do you know how many Hajj caravans I took? We have the opposite. So therefore, we have to be very careful of our intentions because Allah knows what is in the hearts. Hopefully, we can be of the mukhlaseen, inshallah. Please recite salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. So here, Ayatollah Makaram mentions, when did Islam use military force? If you say, La ikraha fid din. When is the place to use military force? One, he says, to reduce, the threat at that time of polytheism. Because the polytheists were barriers. They weren't allowing the Prophet to spread Islam. So therefore, one instance he mentions is that they were prohibiting the spread of Islam. One. Two, to defend against aggression. And if you look at the battles of the Prophet, majority of them were defensive. When you say that Imam Ali alayhi salam helped, that Islam was protected by the sword of Imam Ali, by the wealth of Lady Khadija alayhi salam, you see it was the defensive sword of Imam Ali. Because if you look at the battles, they came from Mecca to Medina. If you look at all the battles, Badr, Uhud, Ahzab, Hunayn, different battles, you see that they were in this nature, they were defensive. And the third reason for aggression that the Prophet used military force was to gain freedom of preaching. They would not allow him to preach, they would kill the missionaries. So in order for this, we see that the Prophet gives three examples for the barriers by idol worshipping, two, to defend against aggression, and three, to gain freedom of preaching. And you see the example, we say that the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet freed everyone. They freed them. He did not seek revenge. Let's finish in these next maybe few minutes, verse 257, inshallah. Now we get into who is the wali. Allahu waliyul ladina amanu. Allah is the wali, the protector, the guider of those, the protector, the ally of those who believe. Some of the narrations say, Al-Ladina amanu goes to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Allah protects Imam Ali. And you saw how many battles that Imam Ali alayhi salam went, that death was certain. And for example, Laylatul Mabid, death was certain for Imam Ali. Allah protected Imam Ali alayhi salam in the battles. So Allah, when you see the example of Amanu in the Quran, who is the best example of those who believe? Imam Ali alayhi salam, the Prophet Imam Ali. So Allah is the wali, is the guardian of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. وَيُخْرِجُهُمْ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. The believers have this benefit, that when you are a believer, a true believer, Allah makes you exit al-dhulamat, which is plural, and an-nur, which is mufrad, which is one. Why? Because the truth is one, and the ways to be misguided are many. Some say this, why this is plural, dhulamat is plural, and nur is one path. Don't say the paths, for example, guide me to the paths of guidance. There was this person, he said, he wrote a book about sirat haya mustaqim. And the Quran says, ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, one path. He wrote a book, he says the correct paths. But sirat doesn't have that plural. Sirat is one path. Nur is singular. Because there's one path to Allah. You cannot just add and add and add. Because logic tells us either something is true or false. If two things contradict each other, they cannot both be right. If you have two religions, one of them says our Rasul, our Prophet was a messenger, and the other says, God forbid, he wasn't a messenger. How can both religions be right? How can both of them be sirats and paths when they contradict each other? When there's contradiction, one has to be true. This is logic. That's why they say before you even study religion and theology, study logic first. Make sure that two things that contradict, they cannot be the mana'atul jam. They cannot both be right at the same time. Study logic first. Then you see that there's only one path. One thing that we have a problem in society is that religion and the truth is always obscured, because we live in a society that promotes relativism, that everything according to you is right or wrong. There is no absolute truth. And if you look at that and they ask, for example, what is the best religion? We don't say what is the best religion. We say, what is the religion? What is the truth? Either you like the truth or not, it doesn't matter. You have to follow the truth. And these are some of the lectures I've been giving on Friday prayers about being orientated towards taklif and obligation. Islam tells us what is obligation, what is the truth, what is the right to do, and do it. It doesn't say, what do you like? What is your favorite religion, for example? Which symbol of religion do you like the most? For example, that's your religion. No. It is what is the truth. Because they cannot all be possibly true at the same time. They contradict each other. So one of them has to be true. So this, we believe in the absolute truth. We do not believe in relativism. So therefore we see dhulamat is plural and nur is one, which is light. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتُ. And Taghut, we mentioned before, the Taghut is the one who does tuqyan, for example. The one who is, he said, for example, those who break the boundaries. يُخْرِجُهُمْ مِنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. But the Taghut, Allah takes them, separates them from the light and takes them to utter darkness. أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. They are the companions of the fire. They will abide eternally therein. When you look at this verse, you see that very clearly there's the path of the wali of God, that Allah is the wali and guardian, and there's the path of Taghut. Over and over, this is a reoccurring theme in Islam, that there is no middle path. Either your harakat and your actions are for the wali, for example, Allah and wilayat, al-wilayat of Allah and those who have wilayat, which are the walis and awliya, or it is for aghyar, others. And if it is not for the wali, it is for the taghut. So we look at traditions, and it actually has that, actions are in the same way. They're either, for example, spent either for the wali or the taghut. Brothers and sisters, this reminds us, and this is the final piece of advice that I give to myself and to you, is that there is no third way. Every day that you have 24 hours, you're spending your time and resources to attain one of these, either Allah or the taghut. And every time you have income, you have money, you have time, you have things that you have resources to give, you have to ask yourself, well, how am I going to spend it? If I spend it for family, for Allah, that is path of God. If I spend it, for example, for masjid, Islam, that is for Allah. But if I do butlan and waste my time, waste my resources, and we have to tell ourselves this, then we have gone in the way of taghut. Why? Because you have given a capital that you have, which is life, and you have gained nothing, absolutely nothing from it. You did something that's batil. That is not the path of Allah. The path of Allah is to trade your time and your resources and to serve, to get something out of it. Even your rest, even your hobbies, even your fun can be under the umbrella of Allah, not taghut. Because I relax, I do something I like, but I make the intention, Allah, I want to do this, perform this, so that I can have more energy, so I can rest, I can eat, to have more energy in order to serve you. But if our intentions becomes nafsani, not rahmani, becomes myself, greed, just desires, that's all it is, then that becomes dunya, then that becomes in the sabil of the taghut. So whenever you are blessed with resources, ask yourself, which way am I going to spend this? In the way of Allah or in the way of taghut? May Allah, inshallah, make us in the path of those who follow the walayat of Allah, inshallah. We ask Allah to allow us to recite the Holy Quran, inshallah, and to understand the Holy Quran, and to be able to act upon the Holy Quran, inshallah. Ya Allah, we ask you to give us the shafa'at, inshallah, and the intercession of Rasulullah and his noble family, inshallah. We ask you to bless the souls of our marhumeen, inshallah. We ask you to give the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam to our progeny, inshallah. May Allah grant you accept all of your actions and grant you all your hawa'ij, and expedite the return of the Imam of the age with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.